Penny claimed that he was protecting other passengers on the train when he held Neely in a
chokehold. Is free on bail tonight after being arrested.
Now dismissing the top charge of second-degree manslaughter, but Daniel Penny still facing criminally negligent homicide charges.
Before finally reaching this verdict, Daniel Penny found not guilty on all counts.
The murder trial of Jordan Neely has come to an end, and Daniel Penny has been found not guilty. He's been acquitted. That's right, the jury said, nope, we don't think that he meant to murder that man. But that's only after days and days and days of jury deliberation before the judge and prosecution in the trial decided to toss out the first and higher felony charge of second-degree manslaughter. And as in every high-profile case since O.J. Simpson rode away in that white Bronco, a little bit of controversy has come in. And of course, people are having a hard time putting it all together. Started in May, it ended now. What's the whole story and how did we get here? Explain it to me, someone. Well, that's what I'm here to do today from a law enforcement perspective, is break down exactly how the case started, what happened in the middle of the trial to throw all these wrenches in it, and then the end result, which is, of course, made Black Lives Matter very, very upset. But before we start seeing why there might be potential riots in the streets, BLM, mostly peaceful riots, mostly peaceful.
Mostly a protest.
First, a word from this video sponsor, Fume. I'm sure you've heard of this flavored air company that is leading the way as an alternative to vaping and smoking. I mean, we all have bad habits, mine's yelling at strangers on the internet, but there's an alternative that you can use to help you kick your bad habit. Fume is a flavored air device that is perfect for anybody looking to break one of their bad habits. Nicotine-free, non-toxic, and completely guilt-free. No batteries, no vapor, nothing to charge. And don't even get me started on the delicious customizable flavors like crisp mint and orange vanilla. Plus, the device is designed to fidget with so that way you can calm your nerves a little bit when you're jonesing. This holiday season, give the gift of better habits with Fume. Just try to tryfume.com/angrycops and use code AngryCops to get a free Fume topper when you get a journey pack. It's the perfect addition to make your gift a little bit more special. And if you're lucky, you could even win one of Fume's limited edition gold-plated devices this holiday season. Again, it's tryfum.com/angrycops with code AngryCops. Or just scan the QR code on screen and grab one now and make somebody's holiday unforgettable. All right, let's start it off at the beginning. How did we get here? Well, as everybody I'm sure now knows, Jordan Neely started off as a Michael Jackson impersonator dancing in the streets of New York City. Woo-hoo. For the past 10 years, he's been arrested numerous times. Since 2013. So all the way since 2013 to now. Abusing drugs, getting in violent situations, and been arrested for assaults and numerous other things, 42 separate charges.
Damn, that's a lot.
Most recently, punching a 60-plus-year-old woman in the face so hard that it broke her frickin' face. And if you scroll through his criminal history, you'll see a lot of 21550 in New York State. That's criminal contempt of court, which is basically he was given a stay-away order of protection for someone. Hi, I'm person that was assaulted by Mr. Neely. Hi, I'm Mr. Neely. I receive an order of protection from a judge that says, you gotta stay away from me. In court, I received that, but said, and started following them around and punching them and assaulting them and not staying away from them at all. And then I called the cops and he got arrested for it, which some people might say, not listening to a judge and a court order to stay away from somebody that you've assaulted and then assaulting them some more would be a red flag.
We're dealing with one sick son of a...
Well, and who is Daniel Penny besides a very handsome, tall, curly-haired man who should be in modeling? Well, he served in the Marines for 4 years and got out as a sergeant. 4 years, got to be a sergeant? He's on the fast track. Well, now he's going to school in New York City and takes the train to and fro. And that's where these two people's paths collide. Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely are on a subway train together. Jordan Neely and Daniel Penny are on a train together. And, well, Mr. Penny's just sitting there chilling out, diddly-dooping around, waiting to go to work, from work, to school, whatever. And Mr. Neely's there having a little bit of an incident, high on K2, and enough fentanyl that the medical examiner said it would have put down an elephant. He starts walking around the train car threatening folks. And this isn't just from Penny's testimony, no, the people that were on the train being threatened by Mr. Neely, well, they said Neely was running around the train saying, quote, I'm going to kill you, I'm prepared to go to jail for life, I'm willing to die. And then he repeated those things over and over and over again, which, hey, if I'm just sitting down on a train trying to get somewhere, I'd be a little freaked out if some guy started doing that right in my face. Because if they're saying that, I'm thinking, this guy's gonna try and kill me. I'm just sitting here on a poop-smelling bus, and this homeless guy is gonna take my life away from me, and I'm never gonna see my kids or get laid anymore because nobody wants to clean up the subway system in New York City. Well, somebody on that train ended up cleaning up the subway system because from photographs and videos taken on scene, you can see Penny behind Mr. Neely, getting him wrapped up and his hand locking him in, conscious, talking, and he's even got help from a bystander holding his arm, making sure that Neely can't get free or break free of this hold so that he can get up and then start attacking everybody on the train. After over 6 minutes of Penny holding Neely, NYPD arrives. Notice that Neely is now unconscious. Laying on the floor of the train, they begin to do chest compressions, but also test him for a pulse and say that he has one. Well, he's picked up, thrown into an ambulance, taken to a hospital, and later pronounced dead. Now, the prosecutor says that Neely was being choked by Penny for over 6 minutes. And for anybody that's been choked, an airway choke or a blood choke especially is you're dead after a minute, and you're unconscious in a fraction of that. And with all the photos and videos, you can see that Mr. Neely is still moving around. In fact, he's telling people, get this guy off of me, which I would ignore considering moments ago he was just threatening to kill people on the train and saying he wanted to go to jail again and wasn't afraid to die. So that's there to catch you up. 2 guys on a train. One starts threatening people on the train, the other one stands up and subdues him. And after subduing him, the man who was originally threatening everybody on the train passes away. And the guy that subdued him is arrested, questioned, and charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. And we're gonna break down those charges in a second. That way we can better understand why he was pronounced not guilty. But there's more to this story. Let's start off by reading the definition of the charges first, shall we? Manslaughter second, when someone recklessly causes the death of another person. And we'll break down recklessly later on. Criminally negligent homicide. You're gonna laugh at this one. With criminal negligence, causes the death of another person.
Do you know what a circular definition is?
That's like asking, what does a rock feel like? Well, it's got a rocky texture. We'll break negligence down, but once again, that'll be in a second. First, let's talk about the trial, right? Because the definitions of these charges are gonna come in towards the end as to why the prosecution didn't meet that legal standard. So we're in the trial. Goes on for a while, right? Takes a while to get to a trial. That rhymes. You've got Huntley hearings, which talk about evidence, like what kind of evidence is getting brought in? Was it collected appropriately? Should it be tossed out or kept? You've got grand juries, got to pass a grand jury to say, do you think a felony happened? And then a grand jury goes, yeah, I think a felony potentially happened here. And you go, okay, cool. Then you go and bring it up in front of a judge and you talk to the judge about all this stuff. Anyway, Daniel Penny is brought in front of a jury of his peers. The prosecution and the defense go back and forth stating why Daniel Penny was reckless and negligent and cost the life of Mr. Neely. And the defense says, listen, he had every legitimate reason in order to act the way that he did, and his actions weren't reckless, nor were they negligent, because he never intended to cause the death of this person, just to subdue them. They go back and forth, and then finally, the day comes where they give their final statements like you see in all the movies. Your Honor, jury members of the thing, my friend is innocent. Or, behold, I have beyond a shadow of a doubt brought you reasonable suspicion and guilty. Which is exactly what it's like in a courtroom. And following all of that, the jury goes back into their quarters and they sit down and they talk. And they get evidence brought in, and they get statements brought in that were taken by either the stenographer or the grand jury testimony or video evidence, etc. And they look it all down and they stare at one another across from the table and say, guilty? Not guilty. Now this went on for several days. And each day, the jury kept coming back to the judge and saying, hey, listen, we're still deliberating. We're not really sure about this. There's no unanimous decision. And the judge goes, all right, well, we'll come back tomorrow. Recess, see y'all later. And that happens again and again and again. And after several days, the judge does something interesting. That doesn't happen that often. The judge reads the Allen charge, which, boom, here it is right here. The Allen charge is, well, I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's not often used because defense and prosecution will often say both, usually defense because, you know, they want to retry it again and again and appeal, whatever. But they'll say that it's leading the jury. And what this long several paragraphs says in a nutshell is, hey, listen, I want you all to take your time and look at what you've got for evidence. And if that makes you change your mind, that's okay. As long as you see what the evidence is showing you and you're honest, you can change your verdict from guilty to not guilty. That being said, if you're the only person in the room that thinks that they're not guilty, and you think with your heart and all of your brains that that person's not guilty, don't change your mind. Stick with your guts. And if you feel the opposite way with not guilty, well then stick with your guts. Either way, you are allowed to change your mind, and you're also allowed to stay firmly planted if that's what you strongly believe. And like I said, the attorney's arguments when that's used by a judge is, well, we don't really like that because now it makes it seem like the jury needs to come out with a verdict, and now you're forcing them to think about what they're doing and then change and create a verdict. Maybe they wouldn't. Which is whatever. I've read it, and you can pause the screen to read it if you wanted. I think it's harmless. So after the Allen charge, they go back in and they deliberate, and they're deadlocked. They come back in, they go back out, deadlocked. No unanimous decision. And this is when the judge and the prosecution come to an agreement and say, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna drop the entire charge of second-degree manslaughter. So then that way, you can just pick whether or not he's criminally negligent for the homicide. Now, the defense doesn't like that because they're like, hey, whoa. If he's guilty of the manslaughter, then he's definitely guilty of the homicide, criminally negligent homicide. But now you're getting rid of one in the middle of this, and now it's like making it seem like this is gonna be just a slam dunk for the jury to be like, oh yeah, absolutely here. Criminally negligent, that fits it better. It's only 4 years instead of longer. We'll give him that, you know, a little slap on the wrist instead of, you know, life for a longer period of time. And the defense wants a mistrial. Well, they don't get it, and that's okay, because only after another day of jury deliberations, they come back and they say, hey, you know what? Not guilty. Not guilty. Well, interesting. And let's break down why those charges are worded the way they are and what the words mean, so then we can see what the jury was thinking. So let's talk about manslaughter second. The charge, right? Second-degree manslaughter. What was the word that we talked about there? Huh? Was it reckless? It sure was.
Great job, buddy.
When he recklessly causes the death of another person. Now let's go to the New York State Penal Code, where all the laws come from in New York State, and read the definition of reckless. I'm going to use Mr. Penny's name here. When Mr. Penny is aware of and consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk that such result will occur or that such circumstance exists. The risk must be of such nature and degree that disregard thereof constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of conduct that a reasonable person would observe in the situation. A person who creates such a risk but is unaware thereof solely by reason of voluntary intoxication also acts recklessly with respect thereto. That means if you're hammered and you do something really bad, you're still culpable. You're still liable. But that's just the end part. Let's get to the beginning, right? Disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk. Let's stick with the unjustifiable risk here. If you have a crazy person walking up and down a train car threatening people and saying they're gonna kill them, and that they're willing to die and go to jail for it, well, I would say that that is a substantial risk of bodily harm that could be imposed on anybody in the train, to include Mr. Penny. Now, subduing that person on the ground and holding them there, maybe slightly choking them but releasing it, because once again, 6 minutes and this guy isn't already incapacitated on the ground with no pulse? No, he had a pulse. He was still alive when the police were there. And based on his statements, there was no intent to kill the person, but to subdue them. So is it unjustifiable for any person in the streets to be threatened with bodily harm to then subdue that person by the way of getting behind them and locking their arms so that they can't move or get their head out of their little headlock thing? Well, the jury says no. You know what? If there's a crazy guy that's threatening people, you should be able to get behind him and hold him down. Give him a little headlock. Don't start choking out of him, but wait there, have people call 911, get up when the police are there. And the second part of the definition of reckless is a gross deviation from the standard or conduct that a reasonable person would observe in the situation. Well, you've got a bunch of people around him in the train standing there, not stopping him from holding the guy down. One guy assisting him in holding the guy down. You would say that the rest of the people on that train thought that Mr. Penny's actions were reasonable, which is an interesting word to say because guess what happened right before the judge and the prosecution decided that, you know what we should do? We should probably get rid of manslaughter second. Well, the jury came up and asked the judge, as they often do for more information, except they asked, what is the definition, legal, of reasonable? And to me, that would be a dead giveaway that they're stuck on the second-degree manslaughter charge. That's the one they can't figure out because that's where the word reasonable comes in. That's where the definition of reckless has reasonable in there. Are they justifiable considering what they're up against? So we learned that the first charge was held up just because people weren't sure what reasonable fucking meant. Is it reasonable to get behind a guy and hold him down when he's threatening to kill me? Yes. Yes, New York, that's fucking reasonable. So now we have a better understanding of why the second-degree manslaughter got kicked out. It says recklessly causes the death of another, right? They look at the definition of reckless, they see reasonable in there, and they say reasonable. Would a reasonable person think that this is a just way of holding someone down, reacting to this scenario? What does reasonable mean? And the cool thing about that is that reasonable changes, right? Back in the day, a duel to settle your differences was reasonable. But nowadays, if you did a duel, unfortunately illegal in all 50 states. So you'd just be charged with manslaughter or homicide, actually, because you've premeditated what your actions are going to be, and then you've done it. You might be able to get a defense in saying that you were defending yourself, but then again, you met there for mutual combat.
I'm not allowed to stand up for myself?
Going down a rabbit hole. Anyway.
I thought this was America.
Isn't it cool how the laws stay the same, but the meanings change over time? What does reasonable mean? Well, back then it was two people could shoot each other. Well, now it's, some guy that's threatening to kill me and I can hold him down on the ground for a while and wait for the police to show up, which I think is reasonable.
There's that word again.
Next charge, the one that stayed. We got rid of that manslaughter charge, right? Second-degree manslaughter's gone. They were hung up on reasonable. So now here we are on criminally negligent homicide. Let's read what negligent means, and maybe that'll tell us why the jury thought that Mr. Penny was innocent. Once again, the definition of criminally negligent homicide is when, yes, with criminal negligence causes the death of another person. Let's read negligence. What does negligent mean? Well, negligence is a culpable mental state. A person acts with criminal negligence with respect to a result or to a circumstance described by a statute defining an offense when he fails to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that such result will occur or that such circumstance exists. The risk must be of such nature and degree that the failure to perceive it constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would observe in the situation.
Minutes had too many syllables. Apologize.
Mother of God, reasonable is back again, baby.
Meat's back on the menu, boys.
So this one talks about the failure to perceive a substantial or unjustifiable risk that will then result in the death of the individual. Well, we've gone over this already, but now it's just in, a lesser form. Originally it was, did he choose to do this, manslaughter, and perceive the substantial and unjustifiable risk? Or in this one, criminally negligent homicide, did he fail to perceive that? Did he fail to see it? Well, once again, it comes down to is this justifiable? Does a reasonable person think that this was a justifiable act? If it was unjustifiable, substantial and unjustifiable, well then, boom, you're guilty. But if it's justified by a reasonable person, well, you're good to go. And then that in and of itself is what the jury thought, that it was reasonable. That, hey, listen, if a guy's on a bus and somebody starts running around and screaming, if you don't have the intent to kill them, well, there's your manslaughter charge. And if you understand what you're doing, but once again, there's no intent, and it's a justifiable and reasonable act, off you go. Now, I'm sure a lawyer's gonna go, you're kind of on, but you're a little off. And listen, I'm just a fucking beat cop. Lawyers and their words and their things are confusing and scary for my small brain. So if I said something wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm all about learning here. Let me know if you like these longer form videos of me breaking down these cases that are spotlit in the pop culture of America. Best way to support the channel is get yourself a shirt. I've got a communism Christmas special shirt up, so why don't you go ahead and check that out. By the way, code Christmas there gets you 20% off the entire store until Christmas. Cheapest version is leave yourself a comment. Tell us what you think about whether the guilty or not guilty verdict was good or bad. Is mental health an issue? Should Daniel Penny just have walked away and just let everybody get stabbed potentially or whatever? I don't know. If you want to see this uncensored, you go ahead and check it out on Pepper Rocks. I also had a little bit more of a breakdown on how I feel because I don't want to do that in the public eye too much. People might think well, we'll just save it for Pepper Box. All right. See you next time, weirdos. The murder trial. Oh, come on, you thing. The mortar. Me. And in every hot me in the butt. I gotta read it off my phone. My chicken scratch sucks.